I'd like to call this meeting to order at 5:09. Closed session was called to order at 3:30. And no action was taken. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Elk Grove Unified School District's virtual board workshop through the Zoom webinar platform. We thank you for joining us and ask for your patience in advance as we navigate this platform for conducting school board meetings. Legislative bodies, including school districts, are permitted to hold board meetings telephonically or by electronic means because on March 17th, 2020, the governor issued Executive Order N2920 suspending certain provisions of the California Ralph M. Brown Act. In addition, consistent with the March 19th, 2020 statewide shelter-in-place order issued by the governor, Executive Order N3320, the Sacramento County Shelter-at-Home orders issued on March 19th, 2020 and April 7th, 2020, and the Center for Disease Control Social Distancing Guidelines, which discourage public gatherings. This isn't a regular board meeting, is it? This special board meeting is being conducted via the Zoom webinar platform. We do not have public comment tonight, so we will not go through those. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Ms. Hayes has volunteered to lead us.
Salute and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. We will go on to item number 3, review of proposed 2021-2022 funding priorities. And we're having Ms. Hayes back up.
So as Ms. Hayes is getting ready, I just make just a quick announcement with regards to the work we're going to do in this first session. It was actually a lot of fun. We went back and looked through all the work we've done over the past 8 years with regards to funding priorities that we've been able to put into place, and $85 million of one-time things that we were able to get done. And in that same time period, we've turned $53 million into ongoing regular services that are now happening across the district. So it's just nice to kind of look back every once in a while and see how much work has been done. And with the leadership of the board, we appreciate that very much. With that, Ms. Hayes is going to go to it.
Good afternoon, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Hoffman and Ms. Avalos. Tonight, we're going to review the funding priorities that have happened actually starting in 2014-15 school year going forward. This document is very detailed and there's a lot of information. So you guys have in front of you a hard copy. For the public, we have it blasted through Zoom, so everybody should see it. So I'm going to try to go relatively slowly through it and kind of point out the different things that may interest folks. If I'm scrolling too fast, let me know. If there's things you want to stop and discuss, happy to discuss. So tonight we're just going to discuss the funding priorities in general. And then for the funding priorities that were approved for the current school year and proposed for 21-22, we'll open it up to the board for discussion on the remaining funding priorities and what next steps are. Okay.
And just to note that it's also posted on the agenda online, so people at home can open it up as a document and follow it that way as well.
Okay, so the first page we're going to look at, this is the criterion by which we do our budget building process. And it was originally initiated under Superintendent Hoffman. And we were just coming out of the Great Recession, and we had not realized full funding or even back to where we were. So starting in 13-14 school year, the state of California folded in state categoricals and folded in revenue limit and came up with the local control funding formula. That formula is what we now live by, and we are now fully funded. We are actually fully funded sooner than what was proposed, so that's been good. However, for Elk Grove Unified, we do not get as many pennies on the dollar under LCFF that we did under revenue limit. So we're not completely whole. The philosophy was that we weren't going to put dead branches back on trees. So it was a matter of going through all of our operations, well, construction and non, to figure out, what is the best use of the monies going forward. So when we did this, and the money started coming back into the district, we came up with this criterion. So the first one is to always maintain fiscal solvency. We do that through looking at our multi-year projection, maximizing categorical programs as much as possible, maintaining and evaluating what we've built upon over the past few years, remaining competitive, building upon what we've already started, and then contemplating new programs and initiatives. And for those of you that watch the budget, we've had some ups and downs since 2013-14. We've had a lot of one-time money come our way through a previous governor. And it's been interesting to see how things have evolved. And then we all had the COVID experience, if you will. So looking at that, we've not had the opportunity until recently to contemplate new programs and initiatives. We've hovered around maintaining fiscal solvency, obviously, maintaining and evaluating programs and trying to remain as competitive as we can. In a few instances, we built upon and expanded on a couple of our programs, and you'll see those as we go through the document. But that's the groundwork, if you will, and that's the work in the lenses that we use in cabinet when we evaluate new programs. That becomes important when you start to see one-time versus ongoing. I'm going to go to the next page. This is a summary of all of the one-time and ongoing funds that the district has added to our budget over 2013-14. So we're starting with 14-15 school year. Those are all numbered by Roman numerals. And then underneath each one, those are the dates the board took action to approve the different amounts of money. So in 14-15, in one-time funding, we allocated $13.5 million to different initiatives and different programs. We also set aside and actually budgeted for $7.4 million of ongoing costs to our budget for a total of $20.9 million. And that's how this document lays out. It goes through fiscal period. And if we scroll down, I kept track of, let me back up. I kept track of for each of the funding priorities as we have moved from one-time funding for programs that we decided to keep and made them ongoing. We kept track of one-time funding for those projects that were truly one-time and they've sunset and they're gone. So in looking, I'm going to use the example of Roman numeral I, option 1, says April 2014, and one-time funds, we had $4.6 million. You can see when we go down to 2015-16, we still have $1 million left of what the board approved in April of 2014. And that's the theme throughout. So when we come down to current year, so our current fiscal year is Roman numeral 7, 2020-2021. And we have currently in our budget $3.3 million of one-time funded projects. We have $139,000 that was in and approved on May of 2018 that has been moved to ongoing. And then looking forward to 21-22, we have collectively since 2014-15, $2.4 million of initiatives and programs that have still been funded on a one-time basis. We're proposing $1.6 million to be ongoing for a total of $4 million. So you can see over time, we've had $139 million worth of programs and initiatives all the way back to 2014-15 school year, 85 million of which was one-time in nature, and then 53 million we've made ongoing. I'm going to pause there to see if anybody has questions. Yes, Mr. Perez.
LCFF started in 2012. I was wondering why didn't you go back to 2012, 2013, and also academic year 2013 and 2014?
We did not start adding programs back to our budget until fiscal year 2014-15 through the spending priority process,
Uh-huh.
which is why we didn't go all the way back.
Oh, okay, but didn't you mention LCFF though?
LCFF started in fiscal year 2013-14 for us.
Okay, so why did we didn't have no one-time money then in that year?
We probably had one-time money, but it wasn't through this particular process by which we were budgeting. So this process was developed to get all stakeholder input, to have the board be able to evaluate program, for administration to research those programs and let the board know how they're functioning and how we're increasing services to our most needy pupils. So as part of LCFF, we now have the LCAP. So
Right,
these dovetail together.
right.
So no more just spending money to spend money. It's very thoughtful. It's driven with stakeholder input, et cetera. So that's why it doesn't go back further than this, because the practice before was, I'm going to use textbook adoptions as an example. That was a process that was driven by the state way back when, and you had to adopt a series of curriculum in a particular time manner. Because we did that, the board would just see the cost of that. There was no evaluation other than the folks that gave input to which curriculum we were going to go with. So from a financial perspective, it wasn't evaluated or along with everything else at the same time. So as we've been bringing the funding priorities to the board, they're brought to you collectively, not one in January, another one in March, as things happen. So a different process, more so because of LCAP, and we have to respond that way.
The other reality, Mr. President, this is the only way my simple mind could keep track of stuff. So we had to be able to know what we were doing ongoing and what we were doing one time. So it just made it easier for all of us to talk the same language.
And I was going to add, Mr. President, and for the board and the public too, what started happening at this point in time in 14-15, so you're correct about when the LCFF came online, a lot of the things, and I think Ms. Hayes will next show you some slides of the detail of these dollar amounts. So in 14-15, you'll see right on the top line, freshman sports for $500,000. So a lot of the things initially were things that unfortunately we had to cut during the Great Recession. So this was a means to start folding things back in that we had to cut during the budget crisis. And the board was doing it on a deliberate basis annually. And that started again in 14-15.
All right, anybody else?
Well, I also want to thank you. This is a very good approach. I like it.
We like it. I know as financial people thrive on it, because then we have everything in one spot and it's easy to keep track.
Oh,
So looking at the next page, this is the detail of what we just saw above. So we're starting with 14-15 school year. I believe Mr. Pierce had mentioned freshman sports. So these items on the left, these were items back then in 2014-15 that were discussed. Sometimes they're in the form of staffing, sometimes they're in the form of programs. It just depended on what the need was at the time. Then we have multiple columns, and this is similar in the different handouts. They do change and kind of morph over time because of what we were dealing with at the time, but everything is split between ongoing and one time. So the board took action on April 22nd of 2014 to approve $7.3 million in ongoing initiatives and programs, and then another $4.6 million in one time. Back in 2014-15, as an example, coming out of the Great Recession, we no longer had funding from the state for an actual traditional summer school credit recovery program. So at this point, we determined our own program in-house because we were starting. This was money that was put aside on a one-time basis to build program and to evaluate program to find out what was the best delivery of the program. And that's what happens through a lot of these, where we know there's a need and we know what staffing needs to go with it or what curriculum needs to be purchased and what kind of student supports are needed. But sometimes we need a year or two to figure out if the program's viable and what additional needs. Maybe there's more need. Maybe there's really not as need that we thought there was. Maybe the outcomes are just completely different. And the LCAP lends in that process. So this is what's giving us the ability on a one-time basis to not commit funds in an ongoing manner that may not be suited for the place that we originally thought. So then going down the list, we actually had 2 rounds of funding priorities that happened in the 14-15 school year. You can see here the board took action. I forget the date is April 30th of 2014. And you can see there was another adjustment of $114,000 in ongoing and another $8.9 million in one time for a total of $20.9 million in initiatives. Now, we try to do this in the spring. It gets pretty tricky depending on what's going on the state budget at this point. The decisions that we ask you to make and the adoption that we ask you to do needs to tie into our adoption process when we adopt our budget. So these decisions, in order to get them in the adopted budget July 1 to have everybody have access to what they need, is why we bring to you guys these funding priority lists starting in March. A little bit early because we don't have May revise out, so a little bit is a risk. It's normally an educated risk. It's not something that we're just recommending, not knowing what we think may happen in the future. The other reason for putting stuff in one time is it's not a commitment. And if something happens where we lose funding from the state, or we aren't able to do what we need to do because of the funding from the state, then we can just discontinue that service. Mr. Perez.
I just noticed something. For 2014, 2015, you mentioned we did it 2 times, correct?
Mhm.
And as a result of the May revise, right? I guess because it's, I see May 15th, so it must have been that,
Yes,
right?
it's usually because of the May revise when it comes out.
And was that just the only year that since then that we only did a May revise after, a change?
No, sometimes we've had them where we recommended only doing partial of the list, waiting till the
Mhm.
state adopts its budget. So we would do one in maybe March, another one maybe in August after the state adopts its budget. It just depends on what the cycle is and where the state's at.
Yeah.
Mr. Perez, if you look at the first summary page, you'll actually see the dates where action was taken in the given year.
Right.
So we see we do it multiple times oftentimes, but we
Yeah.
start in the spring generally.
Oh, the first one.
We ready to go forward?
Very good.
Not going to spend a lot of time going on to the other ones. I'm going to scroll through them, hopefully slow enough for people to read them. I'm happy to stop and have a conversation if we need.
A little bit like cruising down memory lane.
Oh, really? Has staff recognized, like, for instance, I know for a fact that every academic fiscal year, we continually do refunding of summer school. And I guess we talked about just possibly just doing summer school in the general budget. So, so is there anything else that you could bring to our attention that we annually do?
A lot of these we annually do. As we go through here, I'll see if I can pick some of them out for you. Yard supervision, we funded on a one-time basis, I believe, for 2 years before we made it ongoing. You can also see, Mr. Perez, on the summary sheet up front, you can see which of those funding priorities then became ongoing, but to be specific, a lot of the FTE, if not all of the FTE, has been moved into the ongoing column. We had a couple of areas where they were funded on a one-time basis, multiple years. The most recent one we had were the 23 custodians. Those were funded on a one-time basis for 2 years, along with some transportation drivers.
Another example, Mr. President, would be IYT, Improve Your Tomorrow program, started at Valley High School. Now it's at 3 of the high schools and 3 of the middle schools. So the amount that we funded for it has increased over time as we've expanded. And we kept doing it on a one-time basis until this last year where we identified Title I funds to be able to. So it came off the list with regards to needing to continue to use the general fund. But we still track it. So you can see that that's an ongoing program that's in place and we have a funding source in place now to take care of it.
Another one that's been on here for a couple of cycles is parent engagement. So the FACE office is funded through various different sources beyond funding priority list. This one that's on here on the funding priorities are monies that had been used as mini grants for school sites for them to apply, and then Lisa Labast and her team then would go out and help schools implement different programs, but she's much larger than what you see on the funding priority list. A bulk of her staffing comes out of Title IV federal funding. And then she's got this piece here. So funding priorities has given her, as an example, flexibility, even though it was one time, for her to invest funds to start things and get things off the ground and moving on a one-time basis so the site can take it over and continue from there. And then I'm going to pause and look to Mr. Hoffman because we are at, this is the current year 2021. Mr. Hoffman had mentioned the Improve Your Tomorrow. So on Roman numeral I, item D, you can see that 600,000 there. That is now funded 100% from Title I. One of the things we need to be very careful with is in this column that's labeled S/C, that stands for supplemental concentration. If we undo or fund any of these initiatives that have a Y in that column through a different funding source, that means that we have money then that we need to go find an initiative for to support supplemental concentration. So we keep track of that as well. We spend approximately $70 million in services for supplemental concentration funding. I think our minimum requirement is more in the neighborhood of 60 million. So we're way beyond what is actually required by law. But it's important to note that these ones that have Ys on here, if for some reason we stopped doing them, then we would need to find or create additional expenditures. In this particular year, I mentioned that we exercised and use categorical monies first, right? We want to spend your most restrictive dollars first. We have a number of items on this list that we determined based on how we were going to use the funds that they would fit within the COVID relief funds or CARES Act. So part of the LCP that the board took action and approved at the end of September, these three components in the section 2, that total $2.9 million, those relieved the general fund and were moved over to CARES Act. And that gave the district the ability to save one-time money for other uses. Mr. Hoffman, did you want to add anything for current year?
No, I think this is great. I appreciate it.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. Pierce?
I apologize, Shannon, if you mentioned this. So for the board, the items that are tier 1, item 1, you've already taken action on those this year to fund those. And then tier 2, which is the cluster in the middle, are the remaining items that you have not taken action on yet. Oh, not correct? Please correct me.
I apologize. This is enacted and in the current year budget, not
Got it.
proposed for 21-22.
Not for 21-22. Next slide.
Mhm. Mr. Pierce is ready to go. Okay,
I have one more question.
yes.
On summer school extended learning, that's supplemental concentration, correct?
Yes,
And so I thought that we had a budget for that. We give, and then we had the CARES Act, which,
We
so
do.
what?
so in this particular
That's kind of
line,
confusing for me right there, because if we,
Let me try to clear it up, because yes, this document does have multiple things happening.
Okay,
So the Roman numeral 2 in the middle of the page has a different header than the one at the top. So if we're looking at the middle of the page, if you go to Roman numeral 2, item H, it says
Right.
summer school extended learning, and it has a Y.
right.
If you see in the column, it's labeled one time from unrestricted general fund, there's no value in that column. If
Right.
you go to the next one, it says CARES Act. So you're 100% correct, Mr. Perez. We could have spent the 1 million out of the general fund for supplemental concentration students, or we have the option to use it in the CARES Act, which is what we're currently doing.
So does that mean we have more monies in the concentration and supplemental then? What did we do?
What it means is the 70 million that we had projected to spend, and I'm just going to make up some numbers. Say we were projected to spend 70 million. We moved this 1 million out, which means now we only spent 69. The state says you only have to spend 60. So we're way above and beyond, but yes, that money's been freed up. When that happens, it goes into the reserve.
Right.
And if you recall on the multi-year projection that I brought at second interim, there's a value in there. I think it's 3.8 million. And that's leftover funds that, for whatever the reason, I mean, it was mostly COVID last year, that was attributed to supplemental concentration that we keep until we can put it back in the system and spend it on what it was intended for, which is supplemental concentration or unduplicated students. So we do keep track. So that $1 million that was originally slated to do summer school of the general fund, it will be reserved and go forward into 21-22 school year as a supplemental concentration program.
So you're gonna disencumber it and go to next academic
correct.
fiscal year.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so for tonight, and what we want to engage the board in is our recommendation for funding priorities for 21-22 school year. So the board took action in March of 2021 to approve and make ongoing item I, B as in boy, the custodians, a 23 FTE totaling $1.4 million. The board took action to make that ongoing. That same time, the board took action on item IA, transportation, 3.13 FTE to fund it one time. The district is recommending to fund that ongoing instead.
Mr. Fortune.
When we had approved that 2 years ago, there were a couple of things happened at that point in time with regard to not only these positions, but transportation as a whole. And these positions were going to be evaluated with respect to whether or not they met the stated outcomes. We also had talked about if we were going to do this for the reasons that we were going to do it, that we should also take a look at our total transportation policy. Now, we've moved away from taking a look at the total policy, but I don't know how we could move away from one-time funding for these positions until, number one, the service is provided, because we haven't provided the service since there wasn't any school. We've just been in session here for a month. But until we have the data that says that the outcomes were met, then I think we're putting the cart before the horse in terms of making a decision to make it one time. And if we're going to move to make it one time, then I am going to really push that we take a look at the entire transportation policy, because a case can be made for all kids.
So if
This
we make
was
it-
a special interest.
Right, just a clarification that it would be, if we made it ongoing, you'd want that? If it was one?
Yes.
Okay, to make sure. Okay.
If it made it ongoing, I'd want a full review, because this was a special interest group at the high school. It was supported by a couple of board members. And it went forward, but with the provision that there would be a complete evaluation in the areas of attendance in particular. And right now, we sit with absolutely no data at all with respect to whether or not there would be any differences with the provision of the transportation. So I just can't support it going to ongoing.
If I can just address it, I completely appreciate Mr. Porcina's comments. It was a board interest that was approved for the 1920 school year. It was one time. So we could go back and determine ridership for that year. Granted, that year stopped in March of 20. You know, the recommendation that we would bring forward on the 18th, if the board would concur, just candidly speaking, in spite of the Florin High School region that would be being served through this, I can't envision a scenario where we'd want to reduce the total number of bus drivers that we have in our district. And so that was the interest, in spite of, and I do agree, and we did talk absolutely about that, of assessing this program, how many children actually took advantage of the free bus, and then what that did in relation to attendance and other things at the campus. So I do concur with that. I just wanted to share the logic of offering it as ongoing moving forward.
Is your microphone on, sir?
Could you give a review or a history of that issue for the other two board members?
Sure, and I don't want to, I can't remember the name of the student group that was part of a school-based club. Mr. Schroeder, do you remember the name of the?
I can't hear you.
So, yeah, there was a specific student group. There was 3 teachers that were student advisors of these students. They brought the issue forward to administration. They were afforded the opportunity to present to the school board. I want to say that happened in 1819. They came twice to the school board. At the board's direction, we established a committee made up of a number of district administrators, teachers, stakeholders throughout the organization, as well as the student group. They worked really hard on it. The committee assessed the history as to transportation and the policies and who's transported and who's not and why. And ultimately, the committee moved forward with the recommendation, and Mr. Porcina is correct, that we would implement the Florin High School transportation model as a pilot and then assess and measure the issues that we talked about in terms of its effectiveness, and if it's something that the board would like to see moving forward as an ongoing expenditure. But to date, it's been a one-time funded item.
Well, I thought also they included, there was an equity issue where another schools or we were using the bus in another geographical area where.
It was not really an equity issue. What they were saying was that the area in which they lived in presented issues that translated to poor attendance. And if the transportation were provided, that attendance numbers would be better. And so because it, well, I'm not going to get into the why. I'm not going to get into the why. Suffice to say, the board agreed to go ahead on a pilot and to collect the data to either prove or disprove the stated outcome. And based on that, a decision would then be made whether or not the positions would be made permanent. We have no data because we really haven't had a program since the approval.
not a full year. 'cause
No, that's, we don't have
got
enough to
interrupted.
make any decision on.
Right.
So
Madam
therefore.
I think Mr. Porcina's thought is that it would be, we could continue it in a one-time basis until we can do the full evaluation.
Oh, I see.
Otherwise, we're committed.
Yes, I guess we're committed then.
No, we're
No,
not
no,
yet.
no, we're not. No, we're not.
No decision yet. This is why we wanted to have the discussion.
Well, he said there's no data, and how can we make a judgment when there's no data?
Well, the idea would be to implement it for the 21-22 school year. And ideally, that will be a full school year that we can do. Then we can do the analysis and bring it back to the board prior to the board making decisions for 22-23.
Oh, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And to be
The-
clear, the board, and Ms. Hayes can correct me if I'm wrong, the board did take that action on March 10th. So you have already approved this on a
For one
one-time
time.
fashion for 21-22.
Yes.
Now, the thing that's kind of humorous about it, given that those students were higher grade students and are gone, I don't know how we're going to compare attendance rates.
Well, and we would,
Compare it with
I
what?
would want to include brains that are much smarter than mine. But what we could do in a full school year is very easily determine the number of students who are riding that bus, or buses in this case. I think it's 4 in all. We could check their attendance and see what they look like compared to the other population at Florin High School in terms of daily attendance.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment?
Ms. Charis Espinoza?
Thank you. I just want to concur with Mr. Forcino's recollection of how we came to support that item in the first place, and also the request for data. And also the idea that if the data do support moving this to ongoing, that it might signal a need for a larger review of our transportation policy.
So are you saying that we should review all other bus routes?
It depends on what the data say that they will present to us hopefully next week on whether or not this made a difference for attendance.
I think we're talking about collecting data for a full year because this data collection period was cut short because of COVID.
Right.
So if I can, what I'm hearing is we would like to do this one time. We would like to collect the data. We would like to see the data, and then we will relook at this next year as a pilot program, whether it worked and whether at that point, because it's a pilot program, it was so successful, if it should be expanded or let go of. Is that the correct
Agreed.
analysis?
And yeah, with one more. And if we do that, to take a look at the entire transportation policy.
If we choose to
Make it
keep
on-
this, look at what the entire transportation to see if we should make changes that follow this pilot program success.
If we're going to make it permanent. And that would be a really in-depth discussion, because we know we're not adequately funded for transportation. And if we increase transportation services, we are going to increase our deficit associated with transportation
Yes,
in
we can.
doing that.
By drawing more money out of the general fund.
I have a question.
Yes,
Okay, next school year, we're only gonna evaluate one route or 3 routes. Are these our 3 routes?
we're doing the Florin region as a pilot program next year. It's the same thing we were trying to do this year, but we
Right.
couldn't.
Oh, I can understand that.
So now we'll
But
run it as a
yeah.
pilot.
Have we evaluated other routes in the schools?
The idea is if we do this pilot program, see the success and it is successful, then we will go on to evaluate others and make adjustments.
Mr. Perez, I
make
mean, we
measurements.
regularly look at our route configurations and the number of kids that are, that ride the bus routes and make adjustments all the time. There's a whole scheduling process that's in place that work is done. This is just a separate pullout because the one-time funding was put in place.
Right, I understand that completely,
But we
but yet,
regularly do that.
if you want to be like Carmen wants to be fiscally, what's the word? So fiscally responsible, why don't we just do the whole routing to see if there's the same situation in other routes, which I know for a fact there is.
You
That
know-
they brought that up to the committee that stated there was other routes that we support. There's less people, as I recall. So I think if we're gonna just do one particular high school, we should do the whole routing system, evaluate before we come back and do, and particularly concentrate on one high school route. I think we should do every route and see if we could save money.
Well, the board's given us direction as a board.
So that's, that's equity, that's fairness.
So the board's given us direction. At this point, the board's given us direction to evaluate the pilot program. So
Right.
we will do that. So if the board gives us direction to do the whole
Well,
thing, then that would be a different.
So that's what that committee came up here. They did not feel that was fair, that, Florin High School, did not have a routing, school system, the equity issue. And they brought it to our attention. There was other routes and there were rich districts, the rich privilege had buses and the poor didn't. That was the bottom line, as I recall.
Tony, I wish
I
you would
recall.
state that differently, because the
Well,
fact
that's what
that,
they said.
no.
That's what they said.
No, well, that's what they said. That's what the students said.
No.
That's what some of our board members agreed with. But you cannot make that comment with respect to a lot of our bus routes. Those kids being bused out of Rancho Cordova and Wilton are not necessarily more financially well off than other kids in other areas. They get transported because of distance. And that's the current policy. Has
Oh, I
nothing to
agree
do
with
with
that.
anything but
I agree
distance.
with that.
This was a different issue than distance. And
And I think-
it
Yeah, we have that
deviated,
Testimony again.
it deviated from our existing policy.
I suggest that our secretary over here give us access to that testimony so we
You
can
can go on the
review.
website and see it anytime. We can tell you the date because it's
What
on the
what date
website.
is that?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but we can tell you.
We should review that and let it speak for itself.
I think, I feel we had a plan. It was not able to be done this year. Mr. Fortunez brought up a very good point to not move it to ongoing at this point, to keep it one time so we can fulfill our plan, and then we will have the information we need to make a decision.
What day was
Okay.
the hearing? Can
We
you
will get the
can-
date to you.
Can I
yeah.
have the date of that hearing and
We will get you that information.
Thank
I've
you.
already said it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hayes.
So going on to Roman numeral 2 in the center of the page, these are funding priorities that were funded in 2020-21 school year. We are recommending the 2.4 million be moved to ongoing, and items E and tricking me with my eyes. E and I, thank you, are proposed to come out of CARES Act funds. So both food nutrition and expanded learning are programs that can be in federal and or state funding. So we're requesting that these be moved into that area instead for the summer of 21, summer of 22, and summer of 23.
I have a clarifying question. With those tier 2 items, haven't these, we've seen in the past when we bring them forward, they produced outcomes, right? We have data where these programs have been working and they've been successful for students, and that's why we will continue ongoing, correct?
I can't answer that. I would defer to Mr. Cerruti about the data that goes behind these.
Okay.
She wants to know if we have data that supports all of the items in Roman numeral 2.
I thought in past discussions, whenever we brought the priorities forward, there has been
If you go-
support
if you go
and
back one
outcomes.
slide, you go back one slide. Those are the ones that we have measurements for. And so you see those are the ones that are highlighted. I guess we could measure the the middle school athletics just based on participation. But these are all things that have been implemented at our schools for multiple years and are being effectively used.
All right, Ms. Jamerson, do you have any additional questions?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Charis Espinoza?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Martinez Alier?
No, I already asked mine.
All right, Mr. Fortuna?
Nope.
Thank you. Mr. Perez?
No, just that one request.
Okay, not a problem. Mr. Yang?
No.
Okay, and myself. This is not an action item, so we are finished with item number.
So what we'll do, just hearing direction from the board, is we'll bring back this priority list for the May 18th board meeting with the adjustment that the floor and transportation piece would remain one time and that the other items would be moved to ongoing. So in the end, after 8 years, we'll have $197,000 out of $139 million that we'll still work through, but we've gotten through the vast majority of that. So I appreciate the direction from the board.
Excellent. Our next item, Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant. Mr. Cerruti?
Good job.
Good evening and thank you, Madam President, members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Hoffman, and Ms. Avalos. I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update to the board on the progress made related to AB 86 Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant and COVID-19 funding. And this is somewhat of a preview to what we will be bringing on the 18th. So on the 18th will be a much more detailed, this is fairly detailed, but a much more detailed description of the overall program. And so with this, there were 3 primary areas of focus and direction that the board gave the district, gave staff. And that was the successful completion of this existing school year and the development of a robust expanded learning opportunities program, and then to plan for the following school year. And we've been busy doing all 3. The bulk of this presentation is the second, but I did want to provide a bit of information and context for all of this. Our conclusion to the school year, just want to note that there's been extensive efforts to assess our students so that we know the progress that has been made and supports and resources that are needed. So I'm just highlighting our CASP testing that is taking place and the grades noted, and then the Illuminate testing that we are doing. And as a district, we made the determination to implement the CASP test versus district-based assessments. We felt that the CASP test is a more robust test, has more statistical validity to it. And we felt like while it certainly is an increased challenge of administration for our staff, our administration at the school sites and our teachers who are implementing that, it is an improved test and will provide us more valuable data for our kids and families. And then the Illuminate testing is above and beyond. So we are going above and beyond the state requirement to assess our students. And then our high school commencement and graduation ceremonies, very, very important work is being done. Dr. Melanie Dobson, one of our directors, school directors in secondary education, along with our activities directors at the high schools, our administrators and staff have been working exceptionally hard, and actually along with custodial, with safety and security, as we're looking at moving away from Golden One, which is where we had been doing it recently, to our outdoor stadiums. Lots of planning to take place for that, but we will be providing both an in-person and virtual option for our kids and our families. And then our middle and elementary schools have been very busy planning activities to conclude the year and celebrate successes. And recognize our kids and our families and our staff. And they're doing that in their own unique way, both in person and virtual as well. So the bulk, as I mentioned, of this presentation is specific to expanded learning. And so what we're looking at are these 4 basic elements. So summer learning program. And when we're talking about this in just a second, there's 2 things, because this is attached to, and I'll reference the funding source in just a moment. We're obviously planning for this June and July, but the overall plan extends June and July through this school year and next summer. So I do want to point that out. Intercession, which obviously would be taking place during the school year and primarily is attached to our year-round schools. Expanding after school programming. And there may be, while it says after school, there may be options that some schools may also consider before school starts. Typically that gets very, very early, but nonetheless, it may be an option, but certainly expanding our after school programming. And then tutoring is something that we are exploring as well. And I'll touch bases briefly on that in just a little bit. So here's some information about the programs. Our elementary summer learning camps, we were very specific about the language that we used. Summer school, it's not to say that summer school has a negative connotation to it, but I think summer school for any of us, for example, we can have a somewhat of a historic or for lack of a better term, a stereotypic perhaps understanding of what that is. And our summer programs being planned currently are very different from that. So as it indicates, our K-2 students, kind of a camp-like experience, engaging program with a heavy focus on literacy and developing early reading skills. At the upper elementary, also a camp-like experience, but visual and performing arts, science, technology, engineering, and math, a STEM focus, SEL focus, and also connectedness to schools. Programs will run a minimum of 4 weeks. It's another aspect of this. So typically what's happened with our summer programs is they run 3 to 3.5 weeks in June. It's pretty much how they've been run historically. These are full 4-week programs run in June and July. So we're basically doubling up the extent of the program offerings that we had previously. English learner summer camps, there's been some terrific work. Ms. Erin Sipes is actually here this evening, and she'll join me depending upon the level of questions that you ask, but she's our administrator that oversees our expanded learning program and has partnered very closely with Ms. Bollinger, the director of our English Learner Services Department, and their staff to provide regional programs with a focus on, as it indicates, on serving our EL kids. Our instructional coaches, we have EL specific English Learner Services instructional coaches who will be working directly with teachers to support students. So nice things are happening because we're providing direct support and services to our kids while our coaches are working and learning from the teachers and our teachers from the coaches. So it's a terrific model that's being planned for our EL kids. For our middle and high schools, our middle school students, also a camp-like offering. You can see the themed, again, VAPA offerings, science and technology, STEM is a focus, SEL, elementary to middle transition, and also physical activities will be planned. And also it's a 4-week program. In our high schools, there's a centralized credit recovery and course acceleration program. So there's both virtual and in person. Credit recovery is offered virtually using Edgenuity as the program and curriculum that's used. On-site programs, as it's noted, will be enrichment offerings, PE, work experience, transition supports for our incoming freshmen, skill booster sessions, learning hubs in support of the virtual courses. So that's another thing is in-person virtual hubs or learning hubs rather that they will be able to do to support the virtual courses. So robust programs at our elementary, middle, and high schools. Just wanted to point out the stakeholder engagement that's been involved in the development of the program. There was a collaborative team that was pulled together actually a few months ago, several months ago. It began in late January. Planning began, and that's typical. We typically pull a team together late January, early February, and planning begins. And we did that this past year, and it involves Ms. Sipes is the person who facilitates that. It involves all the departments, site administration across our district to begin mapping it out. And it also integrates with, and I want to point out that our special education students certainly can participate in this, what's called the Extended School Year Program. ESY for our special education students is also a separate program that is specifically designed for our special education students, primarily our moderate, actually exclusive to our moderate severe special education students. Our mild moderate students participate in our regular expanded learning programs. The other things that we did in terms of, we gathered extensive principal input working directly. We heard from every single one of our principals. We instituted and implemented a staff survey. So we were getting feedback from our teachers across the district in terms of things like what would they be interested in teaching, AMs, PMs, courses, what do they see as needs for the school. Data reviewed from our family surveys, we got extensive information from our LCAP surveys, as well as you can see from our PAT meetings that we had, along with our student advisories. In addition to the student reps that were part of our educational model advisory team, provided very valuable information for our summer programming. Bit of information about the budget. So this is where it's referring to the ELO grant. So approximately $40 million. Of that 40 million, 10% of that is set aside, as it notes, 4 million dedicated to the recruitment and retention of paraeducators. That's a part of that grant. And then the 36 million is for educational programming defined by 7 supplemental instruction and support strategies. I didn't necessarily include those. It's not that they're a mystery, but it goes through and identifies 7 specific things. Integrated supports, it'll identify tutoring. It identifies a number of elements that are in there. It can include training and support to implement the programs. And all 7 of those are looked at very carefully when we're designing the program, but also anything that we are utilizing those $36 million, they have to actually fit into one of those 7 elements that are in the actual plan template that, as of tomorrow, Ms. Sipes and I will begin typing away and working on the narrative portion of that plan. We had a meeting as recently as today with our support resources from SCOE. They always do a terrific job of supporting us with our LCAP. We got some valuable information. Ms. Sipes and Ms. Hayes and myself met with someone from SCOE, so we're well set up to develop the plan and write the plan. And it notes that this total amount is approximately 15% of the district's overall remaining COVID-19 relief funds. So it gives you an idea of the total amount that this represents. And then as we began planning very recently, as we were doing this, all of our sites were then inquiring this. The process we use as we develop the program, all of our site administrators then reached out to their staff because this is who's interested. And so the good news is we had ample response from our staff. I believe it's one, just because they're interested and want to support our kids. And I believe there's another portion of this, which is we are increasing the pay rate. And so that's an additional incentive and a needed and warranted incentive to do this work. And so once we began to have that, all of our schools began feeding Ms. Sipes the information. She began building all of that in. We then sat down and looked and began to cost it out. It hasn't gone through the official costing out. That would be Ms. Hayes. But she has taken a look at it, in our rough estimate, but we believe it's pretty closely in the ballpark, is that it will take up the bulk or all of that 36 million. And so in essence, this becomes our ELO plan, which is a good thing, because the ELO plan by definition is expanded learning. And so it fits in perfectly with what we're intending to do and what that grant money is for. I put this in just as a reminder. The community and the board has seen this repeatedly, and I won't go and spend a lot of time with this, but nonetheless, this exists as we're planning for this next coming school year and all the work that we continue to do. We have terrific teams, terrific team leaders, and a great deal of work interdependently as we're navigating all of this work. No decision that's ever made typically in any organization doesn't influence something else, but what we are doing now, there are heavy interdependencies across the organization, and we found that this method and this methodology of planning has proven to be very effective for us, and so we continue to do that. In terms of planning for the next school year, just a few noteworthy items, and that is we are planning for a 5-day in-person return to school. We have to have that addition of adhering to health guidelines. It's always what we do. Even pre-COVID, we're adhering to health guidelines. And so it needs to be there, and we continue to be optimistic based upon the trends. We get the county data, and Tommy Almatari, our health coordinator, provides that to me, and I share that with cabinet. So we're continuing to monitor it every week with the continued progress of vaccinations and the continued good diligence that's taking place on our campuses, in our homes, in our community. We're optimistic about what we will be able to offer July 15th, when our year-round schools start up. We're closely examining the virtual academy in Las Flores, our independent study programs, pre-K-12. I did note that special education programming in particular were for our moderate severe students with disabilities. Those are student populations. We have, when we put it, I don't want to call it a survey, but when we put information out to our parents and requested that they make a preference of, would you prefer to return 5 days a week, or do you want to remain in distance learning for this coming school year? And we received 21% response. And what I should clarify, we received responses that constitute 21% of our students. So with 21% of our students, after about 13% of our students that were accounted for in that preference, it remained the same, which was right about 91% to 9%. And so we'll be planning to reach back out and see what we need to do to get even finer detail on that so that we can ensure what those numbers are. A number of our special education parents who have very close relationships with their program specialists have indicated their interests. And so that is an area of focus that we are having for that student group, of how we can provide virtual options for those students should the parents prefer that. Our elementary and secondary teams are in collaboration with our teacher leadership and looking at what does the classroom look like and how do we begin to transition back. Intercession, as it notes. We are looking at intercession and tutoring. While it's part of our expanded learning, those are things that would be taking place for this coming school year. And just a quick note on tutoring. I won't go into a great deal of detail with it. I'll just say this, and I want to be careful how I say it because I don't want to give the wrong impression. Tutoring is a very logical and easy thing for people to understand. Kids could use some additional support. Tutoring is something that everyone is aware of. Tutoring will take considerable planning to do. We don't have an interest in just going out and hitting up a single vendor. We experienced years ago when you went into program improvement, and then what started to happen as a district, and districts all over the country were in program improvement. But once a district did that for a certain number of years, then you had to provide what were called supplemental educational services, SES. And part of that was tutoring. So we had to provide tutoring. So we did that and we contracted out, and there were processes that we went through to contract out. And there were hundreds of tutoring vendors that came out, hundreds that were offering tutoring. And this is why I want to be careful. I don't want to discredit any tutoring organization that is out there. That's why I'll just leave it to say, there's work to do before you're going to implement a tutoring program. And the great thing is that we had a meeting today. I was fortunate to meet with a number of cabinet level and district administrators to talk about this very thing, to say, while we're doing all this planning, there's another thing that we need to plan for. And we see huge potential, potentially working with outside vendors, but also because of these COVID relief monies, we can use our own staff. We could tap into retired teachers. We could tap into people that we know And there could be a whole bunch of opportunities, a variety of opportunities that we see. So I just share, not as a, oh, woe is us, we have one more thing to plan for. I just want to share that it is on our radar. We will do it like we do everything in Elk Grove, which is we'll be thorough, and we'll design it carefully. And before we implement, we will have an evaluation strategy in place to do it. I just wanted to point out, it's an easy thing to say, not necessarily a simple thing to do. And just to conclude, we will be bringing back detailed information. So we'll be able to provide, and we'll provide everything from more specific dates to some numbers in terms of the numbers of kids we previously would serve under our summer learning program, and what we are projecting we will do this year, because there's a significantly expanded number of students. So we'll provide a more detailed, and that was the purpose. Initially, it was to say, we've got more than just the bones of a program, but we want to have a bit more detail on the 18th when we bring it to you, because what we would like is to get the board in a position where the board would say, we hear it, we see it, you've asked some questions, we've been able to provide those responses, because that sets us up for June 1st to have our ELO plan approved. And I'm not saying it's a rubber stamp, but we'd like to at all, but we'd like to think that we would know that all of us would be able to look and know that we're going to be able to get it approved on June 1st and ready to begin to execute and implement. And then on June 2nd, we roll our sleeves up and start to figure out what we're going to do with the rest of the money. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll also ask my colleague, Ms. Sipes, to come up, because she can certainly speak to this at a much more informed and detailed level than I. Thank you all.
What a fabulous thing to have ahead of us. Ms. Charis Espinoza, do you want to start, please?
I actually don't have any questions. This is obviously very high level at this point. So all of the right elements, I see all of the right elements there, and I will probably have more questions at the May 18th meeting, but none at this point. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Dr. Martinez-Alier.
Thank you for the presentation and forwarding the information about the summer programs. I think it's very helpful. I just have one question. I know going back to the earlier slides and in the discussion regarding like in-person versus online options, will there be both for the expanded learning for the elementary or middle schools, or are we assuming that it'll be the full 4-week in-person option for most of the families?
Aaron will be able to respond to that.
Thank you. We will have some optional activities that students can do. There's actually a curriculum that's going to be coming to the board on Tuesday. So our intention is to have some game-like asynchronous activities that students who are not comfortable coming back to campus could be accessing from home to keep their reading and math skills sharp. So those will be available to students who wish to do so. Sorry, I hear the recording, can't hear me. Yep, and I removed my mask, so stay 6 feet from me, please. Sorry, were you able to hear my answer?
Yes, it sounds like there'll be a mix of some asynchronous learning and in-person
So it'll
possibly.
be
Yeah.
game-like activities that are offered asynchronously to students who are not yet comfortable coming back to campus or whose families prefer to do distance, to keep their skills sharp and give them some fun and engaging activities to work on this summer.
I'm looking forward to the upcoming presentation and more of the details. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Fortuna?
Mark is smiling. He's waiting. There's a number of questions I have, but you've spoken to them and you know what you need to do, and so I'll be looking forward to the next presentation. By way of comment, what will be of great interest to me is finally having some empirical data assessing the extended learning opportunity program.
What we'll do, Mr. Fortuna, don't mean to cut you off. We will make sure that there is a portion on the 18th that explains what the evaluation strategy is so that we can provide more specifics of what that exactly is. There's been work that Aaron's done directly with our research and evaluation department.
Yeah, you weren't cutting me off. I was just thinking what I wanted to say and not say. But certainly I will be looking forward to that so that we can have a basis for making decisions in the future. So if we're going to do it, we want to do a good job for kids. If we're going to spend the taxpayers' money, there needs to be value for the dollars we spend. So I will be looking forward to that.
Thank you. And as I indicated, the thinking is not, we certainly won't, what we implement this summer, we'll be optimistic it's going to be high quality and we will learn from. And so it's not just going to be, there's no more planning and we're just going to repeat the following summer. But we'll learn throughout this process, and we'll make sure that there's also ongoing updates in terms of the intersession and anything that's happening during the school year. And then we'll repeat the performance to share what our plan is the following summer, including the evaluation strategy for that. And then that will start to inform. So what do we do after that? What have we learned and what do we implement post-COVID relief funds?
Since I still have the mic and Beth hasn't cut me off
Yeah,
yet.
can you get closer to it though? You're a little hard to hear.
Okay. The one area I'm going to be probably the most interested in looking at is going to be middle school. Middle school, such that we no longer are just providing additional employment for employees and providing babysitting for parents, that there is some value in the provision of that particular service for that age group of kids. They're not credit deficient and they haven't taken any classes yet in high school. So, and we know that in the past, we have had schools with very few kids attending in the summer. And it just begs the question, why are we doing it? And so that is really data that I'm gonna
Mr.
wanna
Fortune,
see.
you're catching me off guard with that comment because we've never had a conversation about your thoughts on middle school, summer school. So just joking in case you couldn't see my mouth.
I couldn't see your smile. Yeah, I'll be ready, Mark.
Yeah, and what we will be looking at, because as Superintendent Hoffman indicated, you've asked a good question about it, and we were pre-COVID when we began considering this. It's whether or not centralized programs for middle or high school, for that matter, just so that we're providing high quality, but we're also trying to look at efficiency. So understand what your interests are.
Okay. All right, Mr. Perez.
Page 3, you said you're going to do the assessments. When are we going to review the assessments? Will they be ready before the 18th?
The assessment data that we will, before the 18th? No, we're still in the process of implementing those assessments. And so there are several things. This is just indicating some of the assessments. So CASP data, for example, we will not have. The Illuminate data, we get that very, very quickly. It's literally internal. Teachers are getting that data almost instantaneously. And then there's a variety of other assessments. So Erin can speak more specifically in terms of the strategies that the schools are using, because she has the data. So in terms of, we know what we have data with, the data we have is the number of students that schools are looking at servicing and serving during summer school. So that was done using assessment data, getting teacher input in terms of which of our students do we feel are in need of our summer program? So that information has been obtained, but this specific information, CASP testing data, we will not have.
So how's that going to be presented to the board?
The CASP data is provided to the board every year. All of this data will be provided to you. So the board will see this assessment data. It's going to come at different times. The CASP data, we have to wait for it, the return from the state, and the CASP testing has been, even the window has been expanded and extended. So every year, the board receives information on our CASP test, and the board and community will again this year.
So what data do you have for us for the 18th?
The data he was referring to for identification of students and the students who are being targeted to be invited to the programs and to attend the programs, and how many classes we're creating, how many teachers we're hiring based on the number of students that we feel, the sites feel need the program or would benefit from the program.
So what is the criteria to decide that?
It depends on the grade level, but predominantly the focus for the youngest students is on early literacy. So there will be specific data that we are taking from the Illuminate system, looking at their early literacy development and their scores, and we'll be using that for both pre and post assessment data to evaluate the rigor and the quality of the program. And in other cases, it may be looking at the social emotional needs of students and school connectedness. And so there will be additional data that we're going to be mining from the programs, to Mr. Fortuna's point, to evaluate the quality of the program and the effectiveness of the programs.
So this, the assessment or the summer school testing, the K2, then you can use a 9-10, math 1, first, second, third grade?
Mr.
No.
Perez, just to, so this is the slide that's about the conclusion of the 2021 school year. So this isn't the evaluation piece for summer school. This is what we're doing. We committed to making sure the end of this school year was very robust, and that's where you talked about the promotions, the grad ceremonies, the celebration pieces. But the other thing we committed to was testing our kids this spring. So we knew before they leave, for the end of the school year, that we've done the testing. So districts were given the option to not do the CASP test this year. They could do something else. We decided that we were going to do the CASP test at the appropriate grade levels. But beyond that, we're also doing testing in non-CASP grades. So we have information on those students as well. So this isn't related to the assessment of how kids are doing in summer school. This is just our commitment to having a really good end of the 2021 school year.
Right, I understand that.
Thank you,
Um,
Mr. Hoffman.
But what I'm wondering about, what do you weigh, what's your criteria to weigh when a student needs school, or what schools are a priority of funding? For instance, it's a known fact that a lot of, in my area 1, Valley High School, area 3, we have achievement gap, and now they're talking about learning loss gap. Now, are all those schools going to have summer schools and extra resources for this
Every
funding source?
every one of our schools has a program, Mr. Perez. And what happened is, and just a quick point of clarification, just so as I appreciate what Superintendent Hoffman mentioned, but where it says Illuminate testing, I'm just going back, it's not grades 1, 2, and 3. That's actual courses in high school. Math 1, 2, and 3 are our 3 levels of, and there may be freshmen, sophomores, or juniors in those courses. So I just wanted to provide that. It's not grade level. Those are the courses.
So that's what, okay, I'm
then-
glad you said that, because it looked like math was first, second, and third.
Yeah,
Now
that's,
you say it's high school. So therefore, I'm very leery or concerned, well, you're not going to have the CAS by when we make the decision. And also you're doing testings in grade K to 2. And we're going to, for known fact, we have third graders. They can't read in my area 1 and
well,
area 3.
again, Mr.
And
Go-
so they're not on par.
Perez,
They're,
Mr. Perez,
hold on,
on.
don't read, hold on, I'm reading, hold on.
We got
They're
you on
not
this, I
on
promise.
par on their reading level. So what extra resources are you going to give those students in area 1 and 3?
Mr. Perez,
What,
the classroom teachers,
what?
they're assessing their kids, their kids that are in their class right now.
Right.
Every one of our schools, including the schools in your region. So they're not waiting for the CAS results
Right.
to determine whether they need to be part of the summer program or not. They're using their spelling tests, they're
Right.
using their fluency tests, they're using the regular tools that teachers use
Mhm.
in evaluating students and developing report cards.
Also,
So that's the information that they're
Right.
using. So our schools that have the larger number of kids who are below grade level will have the largest summer school programs. Because it's based on how the kids are doing in relation to the standards and the expected level of achievement. So what you're speaking to is exactly what's going to happen, but we're not waiting for the CAS results. We're not basing this on CAS results. We're basing this on the expertise of our teachers in the classrooms, in the assessments they use every single day in knowing where their students are.
yeah, but what I'm concerned about, you're not doing, right, this doesn't tell me you're doing assessment on grade 3 or 4, because those are critical elementary grades in which if you're not on par, you're most likely going to drop out of high school and also end up
We're doing
excuse me,
CAS testing.
you're going to end up prison material,
We're using,
prison pipeline material. So
we're testing kids in grades 3 through 8 on CAS
where?
in math and English language arts.
Yes, but like you mentioned that we're not going to get this data until later.
That's when we always get that data.
Can I try?
But we're not going to be making an evaluation on data that is presently available.
It's not
Or
available.
could be
It's
available.
never available. The CAS
Well,
testing is never available.
Why aren't we testing K3, K, instead of having K2, why don't we have K3 and 4?
Okay, if
Mr.
you hold on
Perez,
for a
can I
second.
try?
Yes,
Okay,
hold on here.
okay,
But I want to hear from the experts.
okay. But I understand what they said and I'm trying to take a turn to get it so we're all on the same page. So as a teacher, I'm giving these tests.
Correct.
Now, as a teacher, I've been asked, which one of your students need to come to summer school? Our baseline is grade level. At grade level is one of our determinants.
Could be one of the determinants. We also have the English learner camp, so it
Right.
could be based on language needs. So there's
Okay.
a lot of different factors depending on the camp they would be referred
Okay,
to.
so I have a sheet of people, of reasons I would recommend to summer school, and then I've been asked to do that. So I teach third grade, so I gave the CAS, and that's off, and that's gone. But I also looked at these parameters and put in my information because I know my kids the best
Right.
to say, these kids need to go to summer school, and I was allowed to send anyone I wanted to Miss Sipes to say, I have 10, I have 14, I have 12, I have 8, right? I was not limited, and then I was able to send them Miss Sipes. So those are kind of two different tracks. Does that make, so we did evaluate each child to make a determination if they're going to summer school. And then we also said, we will take the state test and take the results, and that's a whole different idea of programming.
Yeah,
Did that help?
The state tests, Mr. Perez, really help us with program. They
No,
let us
yeah,
know.
I
how-
understand what you're saying, the CAS state test, but this presentation, you're testing, you're doing the testing in K2. And that doesn't tell me that you're not testing third and fourth graders as a criteria for summer school.
We're doing K2 because K2 is not tested under CASP. So,
Okay,
so CASP is grades 3 through 8
right,
and grade 11.
right.
So if we only did CASP, then we'd only have information on grades 3 through 8 and grade 11.
Mhm.
But we wanted information on all of our kids.
Right.
So beyond, CASP doesn't have a K through 2 test. So we're using one of our own assessments. So we do have some
Okay.
information from
Why
that.
don't we,
That's what we-
why don't you develop our own assessments? Because you don't have CAS data for us of K through 4.
I didn't.
I can't explain it. in the-
Huh?
That's another topic. So when we,
What is it?
it is another topic. This is when we
Okay.
provide information about our
Okay.
student
How?
assessment system.
Let
and
me ask you
Illuminate,
this.
we're assessing in all grade levels in both.
Can you
ELA
do
and
a
math.
reading assessment on third and fourth graders?
Yes,
If you want to do that, what's the best way to do that? And to find out if they're not on level.
I couldn't tell you the best,
you
the
tell me?
single best
Are
way.
you the expert on that? Who can tell me in this school district if our students are
We've
not on
got,
par
we've
in
got,
third and fourth
we've got
grade reading
reading
level?
specialists who could provide that information, Mr. Perez, but even it could be argued whether or not their determination is the best. There are multiple methodologies to
Yes,
assess
I
reading.
did them before. I've done it before and had a summer program I developed for Sacramento Unified School District. And if they didn't go through the vocabulary testing such that they were put in our curriculum of study for summer enrichment. That's what I'm saying. I don't see that being done for our third and fourth graders. If in a special program for them to do assessment.
Our
And I'm literally,
teachers-
and the fact that you cannot give me the data for when I'm gonna do the evaluation or where the money's gonna go. I mean, it's silly, okay, so anyway, tell me the criteria, who gets the money? What schools? Does every school get it?
Yes. it's
Every
based- it's
school in the
based on the
school
design
district.
of their program. Every single school is running a program,
So every school, an equal amount.
not an
No,
equal
not an
amount.
equal amount. It'll be
What?
based on not an equal amount. It'll be based on the number of kids that need to be served at that school.
Okay,
Schools that have higher numbers of kids that need to be served,
well, that looks like area 3. And
Agreed.
area 1's gonna get a lot of money, right?
agreed.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. So anyway, let's get back to over here, this question. You mentioned page 4. We've had expanded after-school programs. We had intercessions, we had tutorial programs in Elk Grove Unified School District. Is there anything out of the box that you can provide our students?
What we're providing is out of the box this
Huh?
current year. What we are doing, I would
Is this
consider it
out
to
of the
be,
box?
yes.
Okay. What about expanding the school year? Have you thought about expanding the school year, maybe 6 or 8 days?
Not something that's under consideration at this
Not
time.
in consideration. Other school districts are doing it. And then also, what about, have you thought of maybe extending the school day?
Nothing's preventing us from doing that with the other $360 million that are still in the COVID relief piece. That's something that could be part of the process moving forward. What we're doing right now is with the ELO program is taking care of summer, intercession, after school, and next summer, because this is the expanded learning opportunities
Right.
grant. It's outside of the school day.
Mhm.
And so we're going to get this plan done. Ideally, the board will give us direction next time to continue moving this direction. June 1st, the board will bless the plan, move it forward.
Yeah.
And as soon as that's done, we start the work on the other $360 million. Excuse me, 260, I keep saying $260 million. I want to give us another $100 million. So $260 million that we will have to be able to do the wish list. We have
Yes, I
600
understand
items
that.
to go
Okay,
through.
I understand that. What about, we talked about the expanded school year, you never thought of that, or expanding the school day. So
Not that
what
we haven't thought
about,
of it.
the other two? You don't mention about having preschool. Are we gonna have preschool, summer school for preschool students? Are we going to have childcare? Are we gonna expand our childcare services? Things like that. Now, I know for Title I schools, they need extra help reading. That's what I'm concerned. Now, can we expand summer school and also expand services in the library in the summer? Students have access to the summer library, pick up books, read books, bring them back to the school. Anybody thought of that? having
I'll
a summer reading enrichment program.
I'll turn that over to Aaron, who has more direct understanding of each individual school's program, but it certainly is an option that schools could consider.
We do have budget plans for library technicians
Mm-hmm.
to work with students and give them the opportunity to check out books. One thing we are limited by right now, under COVID protocols, we can't have students who are handling the same books in the library and passing them to each other. Each student needs their own materials. So we have to be strategic about the way that we check out books. So it's often the librarian will bring out a selection of books and the students can identify the book that they wish to look at. And then we have to make sure that that book has been sanitized before any other students handle it. So we can't just open the library and have students going in and selecting books as they would pre-COVID because of the restrictions that we have to keep students safe.
And that's what kids are doing currently. That's an extended practice of the work that we're doing currently.
I kind of disagree with that because you get very good contact when you're playing sports like football, basketball. Oh, my God. Okay, on page 7, you don't mention, nobody mentions foster youth, low economic needy students, English language learners. You did mention that, English language learners, but what's happening to foster youth during this expanded learning? I didn't see you recognize them or given them, and also homeless. Our homeless population has gone up. And do you know, what's going on with that population?
Our Department of Student
students.
Support and Health Services has been programming for and serving our foster and homeless students. And Erin will again have more information than I, because she's worked with all those departments.
Yes, but in this presentation, expanded learning stakeholders engagement, I'm not sure if you met with those stakeholders that represent foster youth,
Met with the
homeless
departments.
youth,
Yeah, we did.
or, well, I don't see them there.
You'll get the
These are put-
full,
Okay.
Mr. Perez, the
Okay.
full report's on the 18th. This was
Good,
just want to
okay.
give you the
I
summary.
just want to bring it to your attention.
If
18th.
if
full
you know,
report on the
on-
18th.
sorry, if you know where it says multiple departments, one of those departments was Student Support and Health Services,
Yes.
which is where the services and supports for our homeless and foster youth reside.
Page 8. I like the way you did a breakout on that. 50% district overhead COVID-19 relief monies. Also, I'm wondering, parent engagement, parent programming, parent education. You haven't had anything like that. Was that discussed?
For this summer,
Yes.
well, we've been doing it all year long through our Office of Family and Community Engagement.
Right.
I don't necessarily know that it's a specific portion of the summer program, albeit a portion of the summer program is our home visitation program.
Mhm.
And so that is offered to, as an opportunity, and that information has gone out to our teachers and our school sites so that they're aware that there is funding available to support that.
Mhm.
And then we provide guidance in terms of how that can be done. It's an incredibly powerful program that puts our school staff directly in direct contact with our families.
Well, I read in a report that the best tutors of parents are parents. If you teach parents how to tutor their kids and get those resources on the internet or through a variety of resources, parents are the best educators, the tutors. And
That's
what are we
never-
doing in that
That's
arena?
never happened more than it's happened this year.
Right.
Because
so
the
I
parent,
need-
you
I
know, Ms.
need-
Jamerson can speak to it. If you look at the interaction between our teachers and our parents, one of the,
Yes.
you look for silver linings
Get
where you
some
can
money in
find
that
them.
arena.
But it's happening. It's
Hey,
far as
well,
what
you
we're doing.
know, it's been a year and 2 months. That we should be doing this.
Our Office of
15-minute time
Fam-
check, sir.
Good.
Our Office of Family and Community Engagement, which has offered parent education,
Mhm.
those sessions fill up every single time.
All right. But Virtual Academy, if You know, I think that's the biggest thing in our school district. We need to put more funding. You know, this is not going to be our first crisis epidemic. And we should have part of our emergency disaster relief plan for this district should have a virtual reality academic program. And this is, the technology is growing, within education.
To
We
this
should
topic,
be at-
sir.
We should be at the forefront of this arena. Academy, virtual academy. And I fear if we do not get ahead of other virtual academies that are springing around this community throughout California, through the whole of the United States, we're gonna lose ADA.
Mr. Perez?
Our
just as
ELO
an idea,
plan.
so,
ADA,
right, our virtual academy has
Yeah.
been in place for several years.
yes,
We are looking at the necessity of having to expand it to serve families
Right.
next year. And we're looking at, how it's formed and what we can serve to them.
right,
We're ahead of most districts. Many districts right now are scrambling
right,
to get a CDS code because they don't have a virtual academy at all. So they're having to start from scratch.
right.
So we actually have years of experience in
Right.
doing it. And we are evaluating what it looks like and how we can expand it in a way that will meet the family's needs. So
And we
we're
need-
ahead of most places. with
Gentlemen,
regards to it.
gentlemen, we're off topic. Can we please get back to the expanded learning opportunities grant?
And well, that's where the pot of money I think that we should put. In this arena, I think that we need to put more money and resources. Because I don't want to lose ADA students going to other academies that are very innovative. Very innovative, what I've seen on a variety of programs. Adult education, I haven't seen, what are we doing in adult education in this arena? Are we doing anything? Expanded learning? Are we?
Aaron?
We are doing programs for our adult transition students who are the 18 to 22-year-olds with moderate to severe disabilities. There is going to be a program offered for those students.
And how much are we gonna be, what's budgeted for that?
Well, in addition to our ESY services, our extended school year services, we are opening up additional opportunities for our students with moderate to severe disabilities to attend camp-like summer learning program separate from their extended school year services, special education services. And those adult transition students at, for example, Valley High School will have additional opportunities that haven't been offered in the past.
Very good, excellent. And someplace I think I've seen work experience. I'm very supportive of work experience programs for our youth. They need to get busy doing a vocational educational program, career educational programs. Because they, number one, hands-on theory and hands-on practice. Now, I'm very supportive of that. And plus, also, they have money in their pockets. And they do not need to be in the underground economy within our communities. Page 11, that's the last one I got here. Oh, maybe it was page, what was that right before the diagram? There you go. Here's where I think that you need to do an extra box for virtual academy. Make it important part of this technical planning skills. We need another box to represent that subject matter, and that we're putting money in virtual academy in that arena. So I see family community engagement, parent engagement, parent education is very important. Parent education, how parents training how to tutor. They're the best tutors we could have. Thank you. Very good job.
Thank you. Mr. Yang?
Thank you, Mr. Cerruti, and thank you to your team. This is a very high level with general bullet points, and how we get to this point, I see that there's a lot of inputs coming from a lot of different groups of people. That includes the planning teams that you stated in there. And just in case, if the public are listening to, as far as I could see earlier, that includes the parents, students, staff, teachers, Board of Education, the unions, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate the involvement of different group of people into this planning process. And I understand Mr. Perez's concern. However, with this many people involved in terms of brainstorming and highlighting into this planning, I am very optimistic about our chances of being successful with this planning process. One of the things that I want to list is that I hope that we will have a virtual, some sort of therapy, for our students. And I was, skeptical about the fact that, our kids has gone through such a traumatized year of COVID-19. And I'm afraid that some of them that may need help might be afraid to come forward because of they may be afraid of being labeled. So I think that if we have some sort of virtual help, so that the student, the folks that don't need to know, they don't need to know. But if you do it in the platform of going from classroom to counselor or whatnot, I think that could push some of the students away from getting help. So I just want you to consider that. With that said, I think that everybody say a lot of great things in past meetings. So I'm looking forward to our May 18th meeting, and we'll look forward to give more feedback. So thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
sir. And just to confirm and I think it's a very important point that you made related to social and emotional supports and therapeutic supports and the stigma that could come from students being pulled from a classroom and going wherever they go, even though we take all the steps that we possibly can as an adult, still doesn't necessarily mitigate or eliminate the thinking of a student. And we've learned a great deal over the past year in terms of our ability to provide those services virtually. And it doesn't mean that would be the exclusive way we would do it, but it certainly opens up opportunities and possibilities. And that's what is somewhat in the planning, is that we'll look to offer in-person supports when it's in the best interest and we have families and students that are interested, as well as virtual options.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jamerson.
Thank you. I just have two quick questions. For the summer learning camps for elementary school, has there been, I'm thinking to all my district communications, has there been an announcement to the content and the structure of those as camps that's gone out? Just because I know parents are trying to sign their kids up for summer camps right now, outside of school. And so there's been a lot of questions I'm seeing as to what will the content be. Did a recent communication go out as to the content about that?
I'll turn that over to Aaron in terms of where we are in communicating.
Okay.
Because predominantly the communication, we can certainly put communication out from the district level, but the communication, if I'm a principal of school X, I'm going to begin getting that information out. And in terms of how I go about doing that, Aaron would have a better understanding of that than I.
Okay.
We have, through our communications department, pushed out some basic information, and there is basic information on our website. And then beginning yesterday, we have started pushing out the student recruitment by site for the elementary and middle school programs.
Okay.
So the elementary programs, it would be the modified traditional and traditional schools, not the year round, because they'll have a different program. But those programs that are starting in June or July are pushing out that recruiting material. So that's been translated. It's been pushed out by site, personalized to the site, so they know what the dates and times. And there's a flyer that went out. There was the Talking Points app to push out via text, school messenger messages went out. So the school community for each of those elementary sites should be aware of what their school is offering and what the options are for their students.
Okay, perfect, thanks. And then for the high school summer learning program, I just wanted to kind of throw a plug in there for college preparation in catching kids up with their college planning and preparation. That may be already a part of it, but just throwing a plug in there. Other than that, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I want to piggyback a little bit on what, if I'm a parent and I'm looking at my summer, is there a time I can ask now if my child's going to be invited to summer school? So I could go, I had 4 kids, so I was always trying to figure out what to do all summer. Could I go to my teacher and say, are my children going to get invited to summer school, or should we make other plans?
All students have been invited for the enrichment programs. Those are available to anybody.
Okay.
And then for the more targeted programs that are honing in on specific skills or specific needs, those would be invite only, but there are options for families who are interested in options for the enrichment, the school connectedness, the socialization, all of those other components that all of our students need after this year.
Okay, and that's coming out from my school to myself directly. That's excellent. And it's looking like you're in a June program or a July program, pretty much 5 days, 4 weeks, 5 days, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to give a huge plug for tutoring and the value of figuring out this tutoring thing. My children's high school added 2 days of tutoring and the math teachers did it. And there was no better, it was the best help they could get. It was better. I mean, the value of having our teachers who are excellent available to our students at a time outside of their time. We're so blessed that we have this money to be able to do that and make that happen. And I just think the value to that I've seen in my own home is astronomical, because it could be hours of frustration or it could be 10 minutes with a teacher. So thank you for that work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your presentation, your work, Ms. Sipes. So this concludes our meeting. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're adjourning at 6:56 p.m.